Welcome to the Messy City Podcast, where we talk with the people who design, plan, build, develop, or even just think about how to create beautiful, successful, and humane cities and towns. Let's learn from each other and create places we truly care about. Welcome back to the Messy City Podcast. This is Kevin Klinkenberg. I'm fortunate today to have one of the smartest people that I know in real estate joining me here in studio, Audrey Navarro. Audrey, what is your actual title with Clemens Real Estate? Are you the president or CEO? Or
I am the managing partner.
Managing partner of Clemens Real Estate here in Kansas City. And why don't you talk a little bit first, just let's give the commercial for Clemens, like who are you as a company and what all do you do?
Sure. We are a full service commercial real estate firm here in Kansas City. My brother and I started the company about 22 years ago, and we do some development. As you know, we're located here in Midtown. We've been in the Midtown market for about 22 years. So we do a lot of work in the city. And in addition to that, we have a real estate brokerage division that represents landlords, tenants, buyers, sellers, and investors of all different types of asset classes here in Kansas City. So we do some office, some industrial, and some retail work.
And you own a lot of apartments, too.
And we own a lot of apartments. Apartments has kind of been our bread and butter business over the past 10 years, particularly.
About how many apartments, roughly?
So we own about 450 units.
Okay.
And we have worked on thousands of units across the city.
And do you manage for others as well?
We no longer manage. So about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, we sold our property management division. And so all of our properties are managed third party now.
Oh, okay. When you were managing, like how many properties did you manage?
So when we had property management, we actually managed our properties and about 2,500 units in addition to that across the market.
Wow, that's a lot of apartments.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about that. Why did you ditch property managing for others?
You know, property management is a really complicated and difficult part of our industry in the multifamily space particularly. And part of that is because there's been a lot of growth. So part of it is just staffing, right? With the explosion of new apartment developments, not just here in Kansas City, but across the country, that industry has been starving for talent. So recruiting and hiring and keeping team members happy is really hard in that space. It's a thankless job. Usually you're only putting out fires and dealing with complaints and dealing with complicated issues in properties that people live in. So those challenges and obstacles could come up 24 hours a day as compared to the commercial side of our business that is really an 8 to 5 weekday type of commitment. And the emotions run high when it's housing. It's somebody's home that they live in. And it's just really important that you have an ecosystem between maintenance and property management and leasing that works well.
And I would imagine, like when you're doing that, when push comes to shove, if you have your own properties that you're having to deal with in a tight market, and then you have all these others that at a certain point, it's just like you've got to focus on what you have and make those work.
Yes. So for many years, I'd say the first 10 years of our portfolio, my brother managed our properties himself. And eventually he had enough unit count that he hired a full-time maintenance person and a full-time bookkeeper. But for 10 years, they ran on a very thin I'm going to say, amount of resources.
Yeah.
And we got to a certain point in about 2014 when it was too much for him to do by himself with that small team. And we decided to hire staff.
Mm-hmm.
And as we grew and hired more staff, we became abruptly aware that went from managing properties to managing people. And that's a big shift.
Hmm.
And we learned that you could recruit more experienced talent and more experienced managers in that space, managers of other people,
Mm-hmm.
with a bigger team. So for the next 5 to 7 years, we really grew um, in order to get to a certain size that we could hire really great senior leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And the senior leadership team wants to grow long term. And their goal is really to grow as much third party business as possible, while our goal is still to keep our expenses as low as possible and to really take a hands on approach with our own properties alongside
Hmm.
clients. So at some point, we just decided, hey, 100 people on our payroll is probably not the most cost effective use of
Hmm.
our time. And so we were able to partner with our COO at the time and sell him the property management division. And now we contract with them to provide that property management service ongoing.
Oh, really? Okay. So you're not doing any of that
We're not doing any
in-house
of
anymore.
our own property management. And we also learned that certain types of properties come with certain types of challenges or
Mm-hmm.
opportunities. And so we've kind of divided our portfolio up into 3 or 4 different specialty types of management groups.
Hmm.
We've got one that specializes in affordable housing. We've got one that specializes in what I call scattered sites. So it's the smaller properties that aren't big enough to have on site
Mm-hmm.
staff.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have one that specializes in traditional market rate apartments.
Hmm. Um, well, I'm going to go back to the beginning a little bit. I think it's always interesting for people to learn about how do you get started. And I know you are somebody who mentors a lot of people, and you're very involved with the Wired group here, and
Mm-hmm.
which is women in real estate development. And you're you're the kind of person that you're always, I think, trying to help teach people and educate, and which is terrific. How did you get started, and why did you get started originally?
So I just happened into commercial real estate on accident. I'm actually an elementary education major, and
Hmm.
I taught grade school very briefly right out of college, and really that education piece of it kind of feeds my passion. But I cannot wrangle 20 kids in a classroom for 8 hours a day. So that was not a
That's
good
hard
fit.
work.
And by the way, that might be the hardest job out there.
That's tough. Yeah.
If property management is hard, elementary education is
Yeah.
even harder.
I find it hard just doing two. So,
Yes, yes. But I went to work for a finance firm
hmm.
that was based in Dallas. And when the Iraq War started in the 2002 to 2003 timeframe, the firm that I worked for financed energy projects,
Hmm.
and it shut down the energy division. And so at that time, I was lucky enough. My dad, who's been my mentor throughout my career, had convinced me to buy a duplex. So I lived in one side and rented the other side out.
Okay.
And I tried.
A good old fashioned house hack, as we
Oh
call it now.
yes, it
Yeah.
was a great house hack, and I had refinanced that duplex to buy a second one, and thought I was a really good landlord.
Uh huh.
And so I went to my dad and said, "Hey, I think there's a business model here, and I'd really like to try an apartment building. And would you partner with me to purchase an old historic apartment building?" And at the same time, my brother, unbeknownst to me, had approached him about the same thing, only in the Colorado market. He
Hmm.
lived in Colorado at the time. And so we decided, I think that summer, that we would try it out. I think my dad told us, "You're going to hate it. This is going to be a hard job, and it's going to be much more difficult than you expect." But at the same time, he gave me some equally great advice of go work for a commercial real estate company and learn the commercial real estate side of the business to figure out what you don't know
Hmm.
and to see where those opportunities might lead. And so I started my commercial real estate career with Kessinger Hunter, which was the Cushman office here in Kansas City at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually I went on to run their retail division. So I spent all of my time at the beginning of my real estate career working with retail, suburban, national tenants and landlords.
Hmm.
And I spent all of my personal time investing in local, historic, small, tiny owner operator apartments that were 100-year-old buildings in the
Well,
city.
talk about two different worlds.
I mean, completely different
Yeah.
worlds. And so eventually, my brother and I, as we kind of grew that investment part of the business, decided that I needed to align what I was doing every day during the day with what we were focused on building here in the city.
Mm-hmm.
So we expanded Clemens Real Estate at the end of 2014. And we grew into not just working with, I'm going to say, cool 100-year-old buildings that we love,
Mm-hmm.
but all different types of asset classes in the city.
What were some of the things you learned from working with the suburban retail chains and doing that work for years?
Yeah, so I think what I learned particularly was how people are financing projects. That was really helpful to me. You know, during that period of time, we had like a really huge surge in shopping center development
Hmm.
and then a really huge crash.
Yeah.
And so I got to kind of see it from both ends of the spectrum, how people were working out deals that had gone bad in 2007, 8, and 9, as well as how people were putting them together at the beginning, and then how they were salvaging them.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that was really great expertise for creative problem solving. I like to tell people we sell math, not really buildings.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can get creative about the math strategy, you can solve almost any problem in commercial real estate.
Hmm.
I think the other thing that I learned was that nobody was doing anything in the city at that time.
Yeah.
And the one project that I spent a lot of time on towards the end of that role was the repositioning of Crown Center.
Hmm.
And so I did get to work on a large scale urban retail project where we brought Sea Life Aquarium and Legoland to that campus and repositioned a department store, a 3-story department store
Mm-hmm.
into a family attraction.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a really exciting time for Kansas City as we were in the beginning stages of redeveloping a lot of our downtown and urban core with, I'm going to say, some of the first mixed use projects that were happening in this corridor at the time
Mm-hmm.
as well.
So you're kind of you have this day job where you're working with a lot of national retailers and suburban markets, and then you have your evening and weekend pursuit with dealing with urban multifamily. What were you seeing in the urban? Why did you want to work in the urban multifamily market?
I don't think it was intentional to begin with. This was when we looked at the neighborhoods and the size and type of properties that we could afford. The 3 neighborhoods that had small to medium size properties that were for sale at the time were Midtown,
Mm-hmm.
where we ended up,
Mm-hmm.
the Northeast, which we really didn't know that neighborhood very well. And every agent kind of gave us a different perspective on what they thought was a good property versus a challenging property. And I think the last neighborhood was Kansas City, Kansas, kind of close to the urban core on the east side of Kansas City, Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the number streets and the name streets run opposite directions.
Yeah.
So pretty
Yeah.
much we just got lost over there. So
Yeah.
at the time, we had both lived and or worked somewhere between Crown Center and Westport.
Okay.
And so this was familiar
Yeah.
geography to us. And they were small enough properties. The first property we bought was $200,000. And literally the sewer backed up in the basement the day we closed. I think
Jeez.
we went to my dad for advice, like, what do we do about this? And he said, you get a shovel and you get down there and shovel it.
Yeah.
We're like, oh, my brother signed up to be the property manager, so I feel like that
That's
falls
his job.
on his job.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we learned from trial and error. We didn't know, none of us had experience with 100-year-old buildings, so we didn't know the physical part of how to renovate and what kind of problems you might find behind the bones of a 100-year-old building. Equally, we didn't know what kind of challenges or opportunities there might be with tenants. And I think pretty quickly the trajectory for most of the properties that we acquired ended up being was they were in such horrific condition behind the walls that they needed new electrical, new plumbing, new HVAC, new building systems completely. And nobody wants to go to the basement, creepy laundry facility. They want laundry in their apartment. And so we did really expensive, complete gut renovations once we realized that that was going to be a recurring theme. If we're going to own it long term, which was our strategy at that time and still is, we want to fix it the right way the first time so that we don't have to go back and keep fixing it every month or every year. As we were doing that, all of the neighboring landlords, many of which were slumlords in that era,
Sure.
thought we were just the dumbest kids ever, and that we would not.
You're over improving.
We're over improving.
You'll never
Why
get your
would
money
you
out of
ever
that.
do that? And every year, my brother would say, if we make it just a little bit nicer, there is demand for nice apartments. And at the time, the definition of nice was the bar was very low. And so every year we renovated our units a little bit nicer. When someone moved out, we put in a little bit nicer countertops or a little bit nicer finishes or amenities. And the other thing that is unique in the city is that, at least at the time we started, there weren't any big mega projects. So the amenity that you get is your front door.
Yeah.
There's not a yard. There's not a fitness room. There's not a big rooftop patio or pool, but you get this amazing walkable neighborhood. And that's really what people love. And so all of our properties have a little bit of uniqueness in their historic context or within the neighborhood they're in. But they all just have these really great walkable neighborhoods.
Yeah, and I know a lot of those buildings. I've probably lived in some of those or very similar buildings, and I mean, it's one of the things that's really holds true is there's probably a lot of those buildings that sat. They were lived in, but they were not renovated or improved for probably 50 years.
Oh yeah,
at least.
Yes, we bought buildings. The worse, the better was our opinion at the time. Once we figured out how to renovate them consistently, it was almost better if they were in terrible condition because we could buy them at a price point that was reasonable and that could help us justify the big expense of a major renovation. And most of the time, we weren't going to operate it the way the prior landlord had operated it. Like one of the buildings we bought right next to the Westport High School or middle school building, I can remember was the biggest crime obstacle for the police because it was on a one-way street with a drive-through parking lot that had two different exits going in the opposite direction. So you just couldn't maneuver. People could get in and out of there really easily. And evade police when they were trying to stop what was going on. But what had happened was it was 3 different dealers that lived in the building of 3 different products, and everybody else was some kind of user. And the one of them had a drive-through window. It was like a drive-through McDonald's, only not for hamburgers. And we vacated it. We bought it. And we vacated it.
How hard was that to vacate that situation?
Well, we didn't know. It was our first experience vacating an entire building all at once that wasn't already vacant. And And we sent notices and we worked with the tenants who did need some kind of help. Most of them scattered when we when we went to visit or tour the property. One of them did not, and said, and it made threats to our staff and said, if you interrupt our business, we're going to, make your life miserable. And the police were really helpful to us in that process. They helped us, I'm going to say, put a little bit more attention at that little intersection. And very quickly, the operation that was there did not want to be there anymore.
Yeah.
So I feel like the issue pretty much resolved itself. But what the police department needed at the time was an owner who was willing to collaborate. And the prior owner wasn't willing to collaborate. And so I think I talked to the maintenance person at Westport Middle School at that time, which was still vacant. It was before it was renovated. And he said, I think we went from an average of like 80 calls a week to 3.
Wow. 80 calls a week.
Just from that
Jeez.
one property. And so I feel like one of the other things we quickly learned was that all of our properties were in a concentrated, footprint where the neighborhood would share with us, hey, there's a problem over here, or there's an opportunity over here. And if somebody could just renovate that big, Netherlands building, wouldn't it be great? And so it really helped us specialize on the needs of the community, as opposed to just coming in from the outside and not quite knowing what the opportunities or challenges were.
Can you talk a little bit about how you financed purchasing, renovating buildings, especially in that time when you're still kind of a young startup and getting into things? I don't imagine you had the access to capital then that you have now.
No.
So what was that like?
So we were blessed and thankful that our dad was willing to partner with us, because we would have not gotten a loan without that partnership. So he gave us a loan for our first couple of properties, and he co-signed the loan agreements. By the way, I'm sure we went way over budget when we got into the construction part of things as well. So having a partner that had some patient capital and that had a balance sheet that was trusted by the bank was critical to that. But one of the things that we learned early on was that as long as you have a plan and you have your finances in order and you're able to send a personal financial statement and a balance sheet and a budget to the bank that's organized, that they're much more willing to take risk if you have the right partners and vendors. So who we used as a contractor was important in that era. Who we used as a property manager, or how we were going to property manage, was important. And then as we did the first few projects, what we also learned was the beauty of the multifamily industry, which is very different than any other asset class, is Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae agency loans. And so we would buy a property, we would fix it up and stabilize it. And then instead of selling it like some people do, we would refinance it, take some of the cash out in that refinance to buy the next project. And Freddie and Fannie loans have become very accessible to even individual owners. As long as your property is 90% occupied for 90 days or more. And I want to say, I think they have a minimum size limit of somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million. But even for a 12-plex these days, you're going to spend that much.
Oh, easily.
Yeah. So that became a tool that we used over and over again. It also allowed us to de-risk some of our portfolio. We could buy a property that was high risk and a big construction lift, and take risk on a vacant property for maybe a year to a year and a half in transitioning it into occupied. Because the rest of our loans that have been refinanced were non-recourse. So agency loans are non-recourse loans. You can do 80% loan to value and know that that part of your portfolio is at least not at risk of coming after you as a creditor.
Right.
And so that also makes the local banks that we partner with, much more comfortable taking on a $72 million or 72 unit multi-million dollar project that's vacant. It's
Yeah, sure.
100% vacant.
Yeah.
And sometimes in neighborhoods that don't have any comps of a rental rate that is equal to what we're delivering in a product. And I feel like all of those were things that we kind of leveraged together.
Interesting. So you're probably, I guess, like risking more cash initially
Mm-hmm.
until you can get to a refinance. But
Yes.
then the refinance terms allow you a lot more stability on the backside if you get there successfully.
Yes. So what the risk was on the front end was the construction budget partially,
Yeah.
right? Which in a 100-year-old building that
Yeah.
you don't know what's behind the walls, we just assume that everything is the worst
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
our
It's a
budget, that
good
we're going to do
assumption usually.
everything.
Yeah.
But there's all kinds of little things, like a
Mm-hmm.
sewer line could collapse in the
Mm-hmm.
middle of a project, even if you scoped it to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
We learned really early on, you got to scope all of your sewers. You got to do the full camera scope all the way out to the city connection point, because a collapsed sewer line could be a $15,000 unexpected expense.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the other thing, on the original finance side, so when we work with a local bank, we talk about the construction budget. We talk about how many times we've done this with similar types of buildings, who our partner vendors are on the construction side. And typically we're able to get 75 to 80% loan to cost on the front end. And once we stabilize it, the value ends up being a lot more than the cost, a little more than the cost, or hopefully at least as much as the cost, depending on the scenario.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And so over the years, you've kept most of these buildings.
yes.
Have you sold much?
So I want to say in about 2018, we sold two small little buildings to one of our clients because he made an unsolicited offer to pay more than what we thought they were worth at the time.
Mm-hmm.
We were so excited about it. And we thought, gosh, the rents could never go up higher than this, and the property could never be worth more than this. But we were also proven wrong with the economy as it shaped up over the next couple of years. We didn't necessarily regret it. I think we went through a transition of divesting of our smaller buildings, which were the hardest to manage, especially duplexes and triplexes.
Mm.
We ended up selling several of them to owner occupants. We sold one to an employee. We call it that Tim Clemens duplex hacking plan, which is how we got started. So we feel like that's an opportunity to give back, and teach people how to own their own real estate and invest in real estate long term. So we did sell some of our smaller properties, but most of what we have, we still have those two original buildings we purchased, the first two that we bought. We have a couple of properties that we came across that were opportunities in neighborhoods that we knew we weren't the developer or the best qualified developer or occupant of. We bought a school from the state of Missouri right next to the Beacon Hill neighborhood in about, I want to say 2020 or 2021. It was probably 2019 because it was pre-COVID.
Okay.
And it was the only school that came to the market that was not owned by the school district, that did not come with a 20-year deed restriction to not be used as a school.
Right.
And we had at the time 2 or 3 different clients who were either charter schools or private schools who were looking for a cost-effective solution compared to building a new school, which is incredibly expensive.
Right.
And so we knew that the only other bidders on this project were residential developers who were going to tear it down. And it was a really great building that had recently been occupied and was really almost in move-in ready condition. And so we ended up partnering. We bought it and we partnered with a school and sold it to a school.
Interesting.
So I feel like there have been a couple of transactions like that where we've sold property to an end user because they were the best fit. We also did some tenant partnerships where we partnered with a tenant to buy us out of a property over time, mostly on the commercial side. We did that with a couple of buildings along Troost in the 3100 block of Troost. Glory at Midtown is one of those tenants who has the option to purchase the property that we helped them move into.
Interesting.
And so we've done a lot of those kind of partnerships as well.
So what's different about the urban multifamily business now versus when you started?
Oh, everything.
So one of the things you mentioned was the lack of competition from sort of the big boys.
Oh yeah, there was no competition. It was all small to medium size. I'm going to say generally slumlords. There were a few folks out there at the time that did really great renovations, but they were definitely not prevalent at the time. And so one thing that has changed dramatically is the economics. I think when I left Kessinger that year, which was 2014, I would say we'd never look at anything that was less than a 12 to a 14 cap. And for those of you who follow the cap rate trends in the market, a 12 to a 14 cap, we have not seen those kind of cap rates for at least 7 years. I think the next year I said, yeah, maybe a 10 to a 12 cap. And it dialed down. And at one point, I think we sold the one larger apartment building that we sold in the Northeast. We sold for a 5% cap rate, which historically would never happen. Interest rates were so low and nobody was worried about the risk of interest rates going up at that time. They were so low for so long that cap rates just kept coming down, which means prices kept going up. The other thing that happened was, I would just say, the access to loans and a lending pool that was accessible to the individual investor. So lots of syndications started happening where people would go out and raise money with limited partners and buy property with that pool of investors. Started happening nationwide. And so that also drove prices up, and then construction costs went way up. So all of this appreciation and inflation in the property side, that had a trickle-down effect to the rent side of the equation. So pricing is one piece of that that's changed. I think the other thing that has changed, when we first started, we started in an environment where, there were vacant properties. I don't want to say every other door, but on every block there were vacant properties. And many of them were vacant not because of anything other than it's a 100-year-old building that needs millions of dollars of renovation, and nobody wants to take that risk. And so I think we went through a cycle over the past 10 years of a lot of people were willing to take that risk. And so the landscape has changed with both small investors and institutional investors in these neighborhoods. And we've seen a lot of new construction, which has, I think, helped infill a lot of the vacant ground or the vacant buildings. Mac Properties is a great example. The time we started, everybody in town knew to stay away from Armour Boulevard. Don't go, whatever you do, if you invest in property, don't go up to Armour Boulevard because it is rough and you will get run out of town. But very quickly after Mac Properties investment in some of the largest buildings in that neighborhood, things changed dramatically. And I feel like communities sometimes need a catalyst in that size or scope to take on $100 million worth of investment, not $5 or $10 million or $500,000 to $1 million. So you need all kind of price points in that space.
Yeah, I mean, in that scenario, you're talking about extremely large historic buildings. very, very large old apartment buildings that, there's just no way around it. It's going to be an expensive
Mhm.
investment no matter what. And so
Yes.
you have to have the big capital to make those work and to
Yes.
upgrade them and stabilize them.
Yeah.
No doubt. How about, let's say, like the last couple years with the changes in interest rates and everything else in the marketplace? How do you see it changing again? Is there been a shift again, or is what are you seeing in terms of the market?
So, over the past 2 years, on the transaction side, meaning sellers being willing to sell for a price that buyers are willing to pay, has been non existent. So, the buyer's pricing expectation went way down with the
Yeah.
change in interest rates, but it's taken the sellers a couple years to get realistic that there has been a price adjustment. What that's resulted in operationally is that a lot of property owners are cutting corners and their deferred maintenance is accumulating.
Mm.
And as their loans mature, they're coming to some harsh realities that maybe I need to sell this for less than what I thought because I don't have the money to reinvest in the property to get it up to its optimal condition. And so we've seen some property owners on the seller side take losses. We've seen some property owners lose their property to the bank, or the bank step in and tell them, hey, this is how it's going to go.
Mm-hmm.
But then we've also seen some property owners kind of sit on the sidelines waiting for the opportunities. And there have not been deeply discounted opportunities on the market. And so eventually those buyers on the sidelines will have to cycle back in. So I think transactionally it's been a little bit slower. I also think that Kansas City, Missouri has had a shift in strategy for just supporting property owners, neighborhoods, and some of the issues that we all face. And I know your organization has done a really good job to really promote clean and safe environments. But that I think is one of the most challenging pieces of the puzzle, especially as we think about some of the most vulnerable populations and the most affordable apartments,
Mm.
is there's more than just the economics of rent involved. There's all kinds of other things that come into play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 It's been a strange time period to say the least. So, what in that context, when you talk to, let's say, if you talk to younger people who are interested in getting into real estate, what kind of advice do you give them? Where do you think the opportunities are for somebody, who's just getting started and they they want to start a path towards like what you've been able to do?
I think the first thing is to learn from others in the industry by getting a job in a particular role. I look at the world through the lens, just because of how I've grown in my career, of everybody's either a broker or a property manager. And really, what that means is you're either in sales or operations.
Mm.
And I can remember the first interview that I had in commercial real estate for the firm I ended up working for. I was selling them really hard on why I would be a really good property manager. And I can remember the managing partner at the time telling me, no, I don't think that's the right fit for you. I don't think what I heard was, I don't think you're qualified. And so I just went into selling it more on why I'm qualified and I could do this. But what he was really saying was, I don't think you have a detail oriented personality on the operations side of the business. I think you have a sales personality. And that the brokerage or the sales part of our industry is the hardest part to grow a career in because it's 100% commission. So you really have to have some kind of foundation um, to pay your bills for a year or two if you're going to try that out. But it's also one of the parts of the industry that I love the most because it's creative problem solving every day, and with all different styles and types of clients. And so I think that really asking yourself, are you detail oriented and are you great at executing an operating plan? Or do you really have a talent for the sales and relationships and business development part of it. There's career opportunities in both sides of that equation. They're just different. And getting a job, even if it's an entry level job, working for a company in one of those two categories, I think is invaluable. From my perspective, my brother, who's been my business partner for the past 22 years, is an operations guy. I mean, he pays attention to the details. He really enjoys the problem solving and the taking a project from start to finish. Um, I I loathe that part of it. I am so ADD in certain ways that it's hard for me to sit down and focus on the details if it's not a spreadsheet. I'm great at the spreadsheet. I really enjoy that part of it. But the finishes, the managing the timeline, the managing all of the different contractors involved in a project, the managing of the property managers, all of that comes with 1,000 details. I think on the development side, a lot of people say, oh, I want to be a developer. Being a developer is a lot different. I think when you go work for a development company, you recognize all of the different components of risk versus reward. And to jump into the industry without that experience, at least using someone else's time and their strategies that they've learned from trial and error over time. You get to learn from someone else's mistakes and wins. And I think that's an invaluable piece of the puzzle. I do also think that if you're getting started in real estate, buy something small and try it out. You learn all kinds of things. If it's a duplex hack, right?
Right.
Buy something, get some roommates and move into it, or buy something and live in one side and rent the other side out. And you will learn all kinds of things you didn't want to know. But you learn a strategy that's scalable.
Yeah.
And I like to tell people, start out small. Don't start out with $100 million project idea, because there's 100 million different ways it could go wrong.
Yeah.
Start out with something that you can afford to take the risk and lose a little bit, because chances are it's not going to be perfect the first time you do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And even with that duplex, or like in my case, it was a triplex, was the first one that I bought.
Yeah.
You learn it's a mini course in the financial side of things, in property management and dealing with tenants, in dealing with repairs, and any sort of improvements you might want to make. You even might learn about interaction with like city governments and permitting and those sorts of things, and all the various codes that are involved. So you can learn a ton on a really small property.
Yes. I can remember one of my first duplexes, which was out by Corporate Woods at the time. The home market changed a couple years after we bought it, and everybody could get a loan for a house without any income. And so the rental market went in the tank for a minute. And I can remember a tenant came along and asked me, do I take Section 8? And I said, what's that? I don't know. She told me how to do it. And I said, well, I think I would take anything at this point. And so I worked with her and with the Johnson County Section 8 office at the time to figure out how to rent both of my units out at the time on the Section 8 voucher program. And I also did my own maintenance. So they gave me a list of all the things. They came over for the inspection, and I thought, well, I had lived in one of these before, so it's in really good shape. And I learned all kinds of things. Like I had to rewire one of the outlets. I had to put screens on all of the windows that didn't have screens, and I didn't know how to do it, and there wasn't an internet accessible at the time. And so I went to Home Depot, and the guys at Home Depot gave me all the tools and the instructions that I needed to make all of the repairs in the house. And so I feel like you just got to roll your sleeves up and get your hands dirty.
Yeah. So another area you and I have talked a little bit about in the past is the affordable housing, supportive housing area. And recently, your work with being the chair of the local ULI district council group that you had us come together and do sort of a focused discussion on that topic here in Kansas City. And we've talked before about some of the challenges you've had. I just wondered, I think it'd be interesting for you to relate some of your experience as an owner and a property manager. And I mean, you entered that area with a strong desire to provide units, it sounds
Mm-hmm.
like, for
Yeah.
people who are in need.
Yes.
And I just think it's interesting to talk about what were some of the trials and tribulations of that
Oh,
approach.
I mean, we could spend 10 hours on that topic, Kevin. I will tell you, we went into this, I'm going to say, um, segment of the market thinking that we could make real change. We have had at the time 10 or 15 years of really great experience working in historic neighborhoods with a lot of, I'm going to say, deferred maintenance. And so we understood the bricks and mortar piece better than most for small to medium size apartment buildings. And we had a property management team of 100 people out in the community managing our properties, which I would say most of our properties are in the workforce price point. So we're not luxury, but we also um, weren't in the space of dealing with a lot of voucher providers. We had a couple neighborhood organizations like Save Inc. that we worked with for many, many years. So we had a little tiny bit of that experience, but not a deep amount. And we started that effort thinking we'll convince somebody else to do this because it goes back to the economics. If you build a new building and it costs $300,000 a unit to build it, and you can only rent it for $500 a month, and you have to shovel the snow and change the light bulbs and mow the grass, you can't pay the mortgage, right?
Right.
So, but if you can buy it for $50,000 a unit and renovate it for $50,000 a unit, all of a sudden your price is one third of that. And so, how can we really direct efforts into what I'm going to call naturally affordable inventory?
Mm-hmm.
I also am not a big fan of being partners with outside civic agencies like the government
Mm-hmm.
because there's all kinds of I'm going to say policies that I just don't understand well enough. And I have been burned a few times in the past. And so I really feel like if there is a way, don't get me wrong, I think incentives provide a really important piece of the puzzle. But if I can get 75 or 85 or 95% of the way there without incentives, let's start with that type of inventory first. So we bought a building in 2019 that it was on fire sale. The seller approached us and said, "Hey, I have a problem. I have an emergency. I need to sell this in 2 weeks." And we're one of the few at the time that said, "Okay, we'll take it." We knew enough about the building. We had experience. We had a lender that was willing to work with us to close in 2 weeks, which, by the way, is a lot of gymnastics. It was a private um, lender, not a bank, who agreed to give us a short term loan for the 60-day period that our regular bank needed to close.
Okay.
So we lined it all up and we thought this is going to be the best thing ever because we bought it at a price that's already affordable.
Mm-hmm.
And we already know what the renovation costs are going to be. And so we can partner with local organizations who, by the way, come to us and say, "Hey, I need 20 units to house my veterans, or I need 20 units to house in my special program." And we thought this will be a way where we can do a partnership with a nonprofit who needs to control their destiny in terms of cost and unit count. And ultimately, what we ended up doing is master leasing 40% of the building to a veterans nonprofit at a below market rate. We told them, if you guys take on any of the property management responsibilities, we'll discount your rent by those line items in the budget. And so they took a lot of the risk off of our plate as a property owner in the unit turns. with a at-risk or a higher risk population of moving in and out, we just didn't know how to budget that. And so they said, we'll take on that responsibility. We'll maintain the units and the unit turns, but we don't know how to do the building systems. So we maintain the building systems, they maintain the units, and then their graduates can move upstairs to the other 60% of the units with a voucher, in an informal agreement, as long as they qualify and meet the application requirements to rent an apartment. We'll help connect them with agencies who can provide a voucher. We designed that lease to protect us if something went wrong with their tenants. And we thought of every possible case scenario that something could go wrong. What in contrast to that happened was our residents in the 60% of the building that was not managed by the veterans program ended up wreaking havoc on their program. And what we learned in that experience is that it is so important to have those wraparound services and have them housed in within an organization that specializes. So, they had 24-hour on-site staff, by the way, in the building. They had all of their case management in the building. And they have all kinds of wonderful, I'm going to say, rules for their residents to participate in their program. I can't enforce those rules with the rest of my 60% of the residents. And if you're peeing in the elevator, we got a problem. I mean, these are small problems that you don't think of that happen every day, but I've got people drunk and passed out and peeing in the elevator every day. And my property managers aren't equipped to do that. And by the way, they're not residents in our veterans program that are doing that. It's residents that I don't have consistency in the case management for. And so I feel like there is a very critical missing component of the services, not just the affordability. Because when you can't afford rent, chances are there's something else in your life that is contributing to the circumstances that you're in. And it could be one of a million different things.
Right.
And finding great service providers who maybe don't have housing to provide their clients, but have all of the wraparound services that go into the case management and the trauma therapy is so critical. So what we have done since then is really look for those nonprofits who need to scale and try to put 100% of their program in a building or in a community. The other thing that we learned is that a clean and safe environment is what every resident, every person expects in a community. But I can't control what residents are doing inside of their own home. And figuring out what those rules and how you secure a building so that every neighbor feels safe when something bad's happening. So we've had instances of drug dealers moving into apartments, and how do you get them out? We've had instances of kids taking over their grandparents' apartments and taking advantage. We've had residents who let homeless people into the building to sleep in the basement or in the laundry rooms, that create issues. And so having a management team in that affordable housing space that specializes in the issues that those residents are dealing with and that are really boots on the ground on site is important. And one of our property management partners actually has a night shift of property management on site at the building instead of a day shift. They said the quiet time is during the day, the busy time is during the evening hours. And so, sometimes it's just little strategies like that we're able to tweak on site.
Sounds like it's a lot more work.
It is. And that comes with a cost, right?
Right.
If I have to have 5 full-time people where in a different community that's the same style, I only have to have 2,
Right.
I have to pass that through and rent somehow.
Right.
because that's the only way that the mortgage gets paid, is you have to have enough rent to cover the mortgage.
Right.
And we've even had instances where, we're paying for property managers and on-site security. Well, somewhere you've got to absorb that cost. And usually what I think, people who aren't involved in real estate the part that they miss is the profit part of a project is a very small portion of the revenue. And so if you change the expenses dramatically, if they go up by 10%, you've probably exceeded 100% of your profits, maybe more. And once you get into a negative operating situation, the bank forecloses.
Yeah.
You come out of compliance with the loan, the bank forecloses, and that process can take sometimes more than a year, where residents get no service.
Yeah.
And so I think there's so many different ways that our community, both for profit and not for profit and civic, could collaborate to fill some of those gaps.
Yeah. Because also, if there's not, if it's too hard and you're at risk of losing money, it's not going to scale.
Right.
The solutions aren't going to scale.
Keep doing it.
No. And like there's nobody else is going to want to get into it.
Nope.
And the way that we scale success often is with people figuring out how to make money doing it.
Yeah.
Somehow, some way.
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
And it could be a not-for-profit making money to support their organization.
Right.
It could be a for-profit collaborating with a nonprofit so that they get the housing units that they need. The flip side of that, a coin that we've also experienced, is lots of nonprofits who want to own and operate their own buildings to control their destiny, which, by the way, is important in that equation long term. But they, on average, are spending 200 to 400% of what a private investor or owner or developer would spend on the same project, because they're only doing it once.
Right.
You do one capital campaign every 10 years. You make all the mistakes and learn from all of those mistakes. And then 10 years later, you have a new leadership team and a new board, and nobody remembers the lessons you learned the last time.
Yeah, no kidding. From an operational standpoint, was there a scale at which you think kind of makes sense for operating buildings with some of these populations?
Scale is good and bad.
Yeah.
So I think the general philosophy of the projects, of having these big scale things where you can put all kinds of affordable housing into one complex, is generally bad for society. Yeah. That's not a good plan. Yeah. And thankfully, the government has also agreed that that's not the best solution. The challenge is that if it's less than 100 units, typically you can't put on-site staff full-time into the budget. And that makes it hard. And so how do you do a 20 or a 30 or a 40 unit building without full-time on-site staff? Or how do you subsidize the additional staff that you need to put on site? Because at the end of the day, it really comes down to boots on the ground, and folks who are, it's little things like, how do I pay my rent online?
Yeah. Right.
If I don't have an on-site person there, and somebody doesn't know how to pay their rent, what happens? Just the communication of having someone on site makes a huge impact. It also deters the bad behavior. Mm-hmm. So if you notice that, someone's dumping trash out in front of the building and making a mess out of your trash dumpster every day, you're on site, you're going to notice it and do something about it. But if you're only there once or twice a week, you're not going to do anything about it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting challenge, because certainly the reigning philosophy, or the lesson learned from the earliest days of urban renewal and big housing projects, was concentrating that kind of housing in huge chunks is a disaster.
It's awful.
And that we should be doing scattered site housing
and mixed income communities.
Right. And but operationally, how do you make that work? That's because, let's say there might be a scenario like in my mind where you have 20-person building scattered in each neighborhood
Yeah.
to help whatever the need.
I've got 10
is.
of those right now that I would love to make available to an affordable housing operator.
Yeah.
But it really takes the
It have to have the people.
operator.
Yeah, the operator and the people on the ground. Yeah, interesting.
And we are experts at the bricks and mortar and
Mhm.
the maintenance of the property and the processes and procedures and accounting.
Mhm.
But we are not experts at the day-to-day, I'm going to say on-site case management. People need help with all kinds of
Sure.
things.
Yeah.
And every special population has a different need.
Mhm.
An immigrant population that's new to this country has a completely different set of needs than a senior living veterans
Yeah.
community or a recovering substance abuse community or a battered women shelter. So
Right.
we have all these specialty programs, and I think that's probably where the best solutions come, is when you take someone who specializes in a certain population and can deliver really detailed, consistent services to meet the needs of that specific population at a small to medium scale.
Yeah.
And then let the, I'm going to say, for-profit sector or the private owners deliver the bricks and mortar cost effectively back to those organizations.
Mhm. Yeah. Interesting. Well, Audrey, that's an hour. And we haven't even talked about Wired at all. Do you want to say anything about Wired real quick?
Yes, I would love to. Thank you for reminding me. So, Wired is an organization here in Kansas City that I co-founded with Cheryl Vickers at Select Sites about 10 years ago. Next year will be our 10th year.
Wow.
And we are a women's organization that specializes in mentoring women who either own real estate or aspire to own real estate on all of the different components of building projects. And we have over 100 members here in Kansas City who specialize in every different kind of real estate that you could even think of. And we also have invested together in, we're just starting our 4th project. And we have several really experienced developers and owners in our group, and several new aspiring owners and investors in our group. So we are hoping to inspire women of all ages in the commercial real estate industry.
It's an amazing group. You guys, you have done an incredible job. Do people in other cities contact you and say, hey,
yes.
How do we do this?
So we have been collaborating in a couple of other cities lately.
Okay.
And that's something that Cheryl and I are really excited to kind of grow over time.
Yeah.
We've had a couple of organizations that are women's networking organizations that have been trying to figure out how to invest in projects together that we're working with, and we hope to grow that.
All right.
Our goal is that 50% of the real estate in the world is owned by women, and I think about 3 to 5% of it is owned by women now.
Yeah, so. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
Audrey, thanks so much. If somebody wants to get in touch with you or try to find you, what's the best way to find you?
On our website, clemensrealestate.com.
Okay, terrific. I really appreciate your time doing this. I know you got a lot going on, so I think this is really useful for a lot of people. It's definitely useful for me, and so I imagine for a lot of others. So yeah. All right. Thanks, Audrey.
Thanks, Kevin.